Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 126 of the Citrix session. I'm your host, Andy Whiteside. Today is February 13th, 2023. Bill Sutton, I got to find a different way to introduce you. One of our listeners made fun of me the other day because I talk about having a great panel, and then there's Bill. He'll know he'll know I'm talking about him when he listens to this one. Hopefully.
I know who you're talking about too. I bet. So
yeah. I've got a great group, and plus I have Bill Sutton.
Yeah.
Bill's wife would be proud to hear you see that you're going to switch it up a little bit.
Yeah, like she listens. She has listened, but not all of them.
Not all of them.
No.
I've forced my family to listen a couple times, just for a few minutes. And, they love it. They absolutely love it. Yeah. Bill, how's it going?
Oh, it's going great, Andy. No
Where
complaints.
were you last week? I know where you were.
San Jose, California.
Yep. Get trained up on some technology out there.
Yep.
That's just a good way to segue and say this ecosystem is a really wide ecosystem of players, and you can bring a lot of lineage, all the lineage really, in the space back to Citrix. I listened to a podcast over the weekend while I was washing my wife's car from Cloudflare, and they were talking about this zero trust and this access through a portal. I'm like, hey, welcome to the game, guys. Glad you invented that. All right, so from the cloud software group, I can't even make myself say that, side, on the Citrix side of the cloud software group, we have Geremy Meyers back with us. Geremy, how's it going?
It's going fantastic. Going really well, actually.
And then with you, we have your counterpart, Todd Smith. You guys both have newish roles. I think I know what Geremy does. Todd, I have no idea what you do these days.
Yeah, so I have a very different role right now. I've gone back to my roots and becoming an account technology strategist. So I'm going to be focusing on about a half dozen or so accounts in Canada. So I've got the Canadian federal government, as well as three of the largest healthcare organizations in Western Canada. So Canada having provincial health. Each of them are, kind of the equivalent of the United States having a statewide healthcare program. They do it on the scale of the individual provinces. And then on the federal side, they have a shared services organization, which basically provides IT as well as a bunch of other services to all of the different agencies and directorates up there. So it's a pretty exciting time in my career, getting back to interacting directly with customers and helping them solve problems and help them identify problems they may not even know exist.
Mm-hmm. And I don't know about Geremy and Bill, but I'm jealous.
Yeah, it's fun times.
Yeah, to be able to go back and get back to your roots and actually dig in and help customers solve problems using technologies that you've always known could help them, and they know it too. But now to be able to actually go make it happen, that's awesome. Go ahead, Bill.
I was just going to agree. That's sounds really exciting, Todd. I'm sure you're thrilled.
Yep.
Yeah. I'm back. So you came up this morning, Todd, and someone asked me the question on what types of accounts you were covering in Canada. So I'm glad you answered that question. I can go back and tell them exactly what that is. And I guess because you're just covering federal, and I guess the healthcare organizations would fall under federal in the Canadian realm, right? Right. That makes sense.
Yeah. It's considered public sector, just like in the United States, where we have a public sector team that covers both federal accounts as well as individual states and local governments. It's the same up in Canada, except it's on a slightly smaller scale. Their government is not as large as the United States government for a multitude of reasons. We can get into that conversation on a different podcast. But I think there's a lot of similarities, and the challenges that are facing organizations like government agencies, where they don't have the choice to say yes or no to what funding mechanisms they can utilize. And more importantly, they don't have yes or no to deliver some of the services. The services are guaranteed as a citizen of the country that you're going to get those services, and the government just has to provide it. And there's opportunities here to help the organization streamline, to be more efficient, be able to reach out to healthcare populations that are all over the place. Canada can be a very rural country when you look at it as far as population densities. But yet they still have the expectations that they can get those services wherever they are.
That's awesome. Well, more importantly, it's good to see you on here, man. I haven't seen you on in like a month. So you popped in. And two things. One, I'm used to seeing the Irving jersey in the background. So
I'm in an office.
And you have a super nice camera. So you've done something here. I don't know what it was, but I see
it's a different
high definition Todd on the screen.
Yeah. So it's a different laptop. It's not going through so my home office, I have an Intel NUC device, as well as a what I'm seeing now is a fairly low-end Logitech camera on it. So those two improvements of going towards a better laptop. Last week you guys were talking about the multitude of devices that you guys carry. I've tried to simplify it a little bit more and saying, hey, I've got a laptop that's pretty decent. It was advertised as more of a gamer laptop, so it's got better quality on the audio and video side. But once again, when I'm connecting to a Citrix virtual desktop or connecting to a series of web-based apps, I don't really need the high power on the endpoint until I start to do audio video, like collaboration tools.
And even then, you may not need it unless you're going to be having certain types of meetings, or like in this case,
Correct.
recording a podcast or a video cast. It is an interesting time. You guys went from one area to another. It is doing work in Canada and seeing the way the government acts there, and the ability to think big but do it on a smaller scale and a manageable scale, and actually get some things done versus having, I don't know, 1,000 different agencies all going their own direction. Keep us posted on how that goes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, guys, we've decided for today we would cover, let me share my screen with you guys, you can see it. We would cover the topic of connector appliances.
Andy, this topic's a little bit of a Trojan horse, right? So it's kind of a quick and dirty one. We've released the Connector Appliance virtual appliance for the Nutanix AHV platform, which is awesome. But I think just wrapped up in this conversation is, number one, we've got this thing called a Connector Appliance. How is that? Number one, what is it? And number two, how is that different than maybe other kinds of appliances that sit, in a resource location as it relates to Citrix Cloud, whether you're running any of the services? And then number two, what's the future of these connectors, and kind of what is the Connector Appliance for? And I think there's a lot of wrapped up in here.
I think one thing, Geremy, on this is that the and more is really that's the they kind of hid that in the headline, right? Because it's not just about Nutanix AHV, it's about a whole bunch of other hosting platforms that you can use this connector appliance for.
Because
I'm pretty excited about that.
I assume you can hear me okay. Help us understand where the cloud connectors, was it called cloud? What was the original name when Citrix Cloud came out for the connector appliance?
It was a gateway connector, I think, was the original one. So we had just the cloud connector. That has always been the thing when you were connecting any sort of resource location, like DAS resources, VDAs, things like that. It's always been the cloud connector. But originally we had something called a gateway appliance. And for a while there, you would log in, it would be very confusing. You would log in and see cloud connector, you would see gateway connector, and then you would see this new thing. And this is what this article covers, which is the gateway appliance. And so at one point you had all three. Now they all had different purposes, and ultimately the cloud connector has always been DAS, but the connector appliance replaces the gateway connector, which kind of a moot point now because I don't even think it's in the interface anymore. So you shouldn't even see that option.
So what's the difference between the cloud connectors and the connector appliances in terms of functionality?
So the cloud connector is built and has always supported a DAS deployment. Whereas, so for instance, when you think about the VDAs that might sit in a resource location, whether they're in a cloud or if they're on-prem, there's got to be some kind of communication between the VDAs and the Citrix DAS service. Now, you can actually architect it to not leverage cloud connectors. So that's what the rendezvous protocol is for. But ultimately, things like the XML broker, being able to tie into an on-premise, Active Directory, being able to control things like, your ESXi machine creation services and anything that involves tying into the underlying platform. Not so much with the public cloud because we can leverage the public IP APIs there, but if you're deploying a DAS tenant and you need to communicate with a resource location, you did that with the Cloud Connector and supported all the services you need, in addition to things like a local host cache as well. So it's running a copy of SQL Express. And if you lose any sort of connectivity, to the DAS service, that Cloud Connector is also running that software as well. In fact, there's maybe 20 or so services that all run on that Windows instance, because that's what it is, to support, a DAS resource location.
Yeah, and to add on, I think the biggest thing here is that it's kind of flipped it over to become more of a Linux-based appliance. So you don't have to have a Windows machine sitting out there acting as a gateway or a connector.
Yeah. So, hey, go ahead, Andy.
Well, and does the Connector Appliance replace all the functionality of a Windows-based cloud connector, or are there limitations to what it can do?
There are limitations. So the intention of the Connector Appliance, or even the Gateway Connector originally, was to support things like secure private access, originally to support the micro app service, which that's going into life, but it's to support the secure private access service. So being able to do things like broker web and SaaS apps through to a resource location, even sort of a VPN replace where you're using the secure access client, but it was an entirely different use case. In fact, I think at the bottom of this article, it talks about that piece as well as supporting things like Citrix Cloud Hypervisor. So last year, we released cloud management of XenTegra, of Citrix Hypervisor, and that is all done through this same Connector Appliance, which is fantastic. But you still need, if you're going to deploy both, if you're going to do secure private access and you're going to do DAS, you're going to need both today. And so I think long term, the goal is to migrate a lot of those Windows-based cloud connector services over to the Connector Appliance, but we're not there yet. I don't know what the roadmap is for when that's going to happen, but there's certainly an appetite to get that done. So Connector Appliance is Linux-based. It's a custom version of Linux. Cloud Connector's Windows-based. The goal is to eventually migrate some things over so that maybe you just have one Connector Appliance to rule them all.
So, Bill, have you run into opportunities to have these conversations?
Yes, where we've had opportunities where we're deploying Citrix DAS and we get the question about, well, what do I do about all my SaaS apps? Do I have to publish a browser? Can I use a different approach? Can I still leverage Workspace? And where we've run into those, we've talked about SPA and leveraging the connector appliance to handle those connections and how that works. I think we've implemented it. Maybe I don't know that we implemented it on Nutanix per se, the connector appliance that is, but I believe we've done it at least once or twice with SPA in an on-prem environment, on-premises environment.
You guys, and I apologize to you and our listeners. I'm struggling with audio. I'm working remote today, and I've found limitations of this setup I got on. I killed everybody's video. I'm sure you saw that.
I just saw that.
Yep.
So guys, help me understand what I know, Jeremy, you made reference to this eventually replacing the cloud connector. Is there ever a day where some of those Windows services can fully go to a Linux appliance, or is that asking the impossible?
I don't know, right? So in my head, so I have this is me spitballing here. So this is me not knowing anything particular, but you're probably asking the same questions I'm asking. Like, for instance, that the local host cache service is a SQL Express database that lives on the Windows Cloud Connector, right? So knowing that the Connector Appliance is a Linux-based instance and can't run SQL Express, what does that look like? And what is that engineering effort to move that over? I don't know, but that is sort of key to some of the failover strategy in the instance that you lose access to the cloud. So I don't know what the engineering effort is going to look like, Andy, and when we might see that, because that's just one of many services that all run. I was talking to one of my guys this morning, and he was telling me that, the LDAP implementation on like a NetScaler is completely different than how that works on like a Windows appliance. So, there's lots of things that need to be sorted out before you can make a full move over.
Okay. Todd, are you having customers ask you about the ability to eliminate that Windows Windows server from the equation?
Yeah, and it's primarily coming out of a lot of the security conversations, because I think for the past 5 to 10 years, the security folks have really been saying don't put Windows servers outside of a firewall, or don't have them acting like a gateway. And I think that a lot of times they hear the words gateway and Windows and things like that, and they get a little fearful because sometimes they don't fully understand what the purpose of those devices are, or those appliances are. So having a hardened Linux device out there, or some other operating system, or some other type of device that's out there can really kind of help put the security folks at ease. At the same time, if you can reduce some of the costs or make it more efficient, there's a lot of benefit there. But yeah, we're hearing this from customers. We're also hearing it from some of our other ecosystem partners as well, moving away from some of the more expensive, more costly to maintain solutions that are out there that require Windows-based services.
The other thing too, Andy, is the Connector Appliance is so easy to deploy. So when you think about what it takes to stand up a Windows instance, number one, you're deploying from Azure, but let's just say you got that piece down, and you've got an automated way to push out Windows, and you can actually automate a lot of that install. But I mean, listen, it's a Windows machine, and even though it's not sitting in the DMZ, it doesn't need to. There's still some security due diligence that's got to happen. So what are the tools, the agents, and that sort of thing that need to sit on the box? It can easily take, a day or two just to get a Windows box, on the network, much less having the connector software on. And this is just coming back. This is just based on POCs that I've seen. Whereas this Connector Appliance is a virtual instance, right? It's a virtual appliance. It's been around for, XenTegra, Hyper-V, or ESX for a while. It's actually available on the public store in each of the 3 major hyperscalers. Microsoft, Amazon, and Google. But once you've deployed it and this guy boots up, and you connect to a web interface and you enter in a code, and within 15 minutes, this Connector Appliance is online and connected back to your Citrix cloud tenant, which is pretty impressive. So there's less footprint. It's easy to deploy. This is where I want it to go. We're just not there yet for all the cloud connector services.
Yeah, I think the conversation is a lot easier if you're not talking about a Windows server that's handling all the proxy traffic, if you will, or even though it's not technically, it does not allow inbound type access. It's more of an outbound proxy, to Citrix Cloud. I still think the conversation is a lot easier if it's not Windows, for the reasons that Todd stated earlier around maintenance and security and other elements. So ultimately, if we can get to the point where we have some other operating system or an appliance focused solution for the connector like this, that essentially will allow us to manage all of the services that we're delivering, I think that would be ideal.
Or in the case of DAS, we just don't need the Windows piece of the equation any longer.
Yep.
So, guys, I think there's a couple elements of this article, right? It gave us a great opportunity to talk about connectors, and whether it's the cloud connectors or whether it's the connector for secure private access types of scenarios. The other is the highlight the relationship between Citrix and Nutanix, specifically Nutanix AHV, which is their hypervisor, Acropolis hypervisor, not to be confused with AOS, which is their Acropolis operating system, which runs on lots of other hypervisors. Geremy, Todd, are you guys getting the sense in the field that you're hearing more and more positive conversations between Citrix and Nutanix?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, I'm pretty thrilled that this released finally. So we're talking to our Nutanix peers. In fact, I'd argue for the past year and a half have had lots of sort of joint engineering solution engagements, which have been fun to follow. And so I'm actually a little surprised it took as long as we did to get this piece out, but yeah, this is great because we're doing a lot with Nutanix. It's widely deployed for a lot of DAS workloads, but as folks are standardizing their hardware stack, this is one less thing that needs to live outside of AHV.
Well, and I think one of the things to add in here is, the support to be able to manage these connector appliances through Nutanix Prism, right? So that's their management console, and you could turn around and say, hey, you know what? If I can manage the connectors directly from my Nutanix console, I don't need to go and have two consoles up and running, or kind of deal with a lot of the challenges of getting people trained on how to use both solutions, right? So the more and more we see this common management framework, and whether it be through the consoles or through the APIs, that's going to continue to drive some efficiencies, some cost savings, and more importantly, some adoption.
Yeah, and this conversation is really interesting. We're going to talk about, public cloud or hyperscalers, and then we'll come back to the Nutanix conversation again and talk about, whether you run one on the other. But you guys mentioned a while ago, I don't know if we have to go into a lot of detail, but the ability to run on public cloud, somebody else's data center run by Microsoft, Google, Amazon, Nutanix. Well, I guess just any other common. Geremy, you kind of hit it a while ago, right? The ability to just go in and subscribe to one through Azure, GCP, AWS, and within a few minutes it's up and going, and off you go.
Yeah, that's it. In fact, when this was first released, it was a virtual appliance that you had to import into each of these cloud platforms. So you could snag the virtual appliance from Citrix, from the downloads website, and then there was a workflow to actually import it in. But now they're all available from the public marketplaces on each. So what's interesting is I didn't realize it was on the Google Cloud Marketplace. Maybe I just hadn't looked yet, but I've definitely deployed from Azure. I know it's on the AWS, but it's cool to see it's also on the Google Cloud Marketplace as well. So what that means is you can search up Connector Appliance from within your marketplace and deploy from there, or script it out if you need to.
It's fun to see this world of all these promised abilities that we thought were just theories 10 years ago, now becoming you click a few boxes, it deploys. We're all old enough to remember deploying on physical hardware in our data center being the only option available. The days are long gone.
Right.
The next generation won't know that ever existed.
Well, you don't need to carry around a folder full of diskettes or a folder full of CD-ROMs or multiple USB drives. You just you pull them down from the marketplace, and I think the big benefit there is because it is on the marketplaces. They've been vetted out by the folks that manage those marketplaces, right? So they're supportable and they're sustainable, and you're not having to go through that extra steps of having to import it, right? Because that was always the worst fear, is that you go and import something and 99% of the way done it would fail and you'd have to redo it. Right. It's been tested and it's become a lot easier. So.
Well, not just that. So Andy, you said something that I don't think you realize you said, but you got folks from a generation who are used to doing quote unquote clicking. And it's easy to go to the marketplace and click and deploy and things like that. But we've got organizations that are trying to automate some of these cloud processes, and the idea that now, I've got an Azure script that I'm building that I can use to run to deploy a resource location. I mean, that is how a lot of larger organizations are deploying. So, the fact that you go to the marketplace is fantastic. In fact, I'd argue that most folks are going to do that. But, occasionally I'll have someone come to me and say, hey, how can I automate all this? How can we tie this into some of our internal processes to where we can just define a resource location in a certain cloud and have it go out and deploy all the pieces that needed. Here's another thing it's just becoming a part of DevOps for a lot of these organizations.
Yeah. So I scroll down, I'm looking at the what's next section. Some of the stuff we've been talking about shows up here. Todd, you want to take first crack at covering this, and then Geremy and Bill, if you guys want to chime in.
Yeah, I mean, I think when we talk about what's next, and I think Geremy just mentioned it earlier, is the challenge of finally seeing some of these promises come to fruition and being delivered. I think there's a lot of questions about, okay, what are some of the additional things that we can run through this connector appliance? Being able to support multi-domain AD authentication, supporting secure private access. IPS is becoming more and more of a concern with a lot of organizations, and then being able to connect out to the Citrix Hypervisor Cloud as an example, right? Adding more use cases to these appliances is going to help us become more efficient and more cost effective for a lot of customers, and not only be more efficient and cost effective, but continue to maintain that level of security, and making sure that as we're continuing to develop more and more features and functionalities around DAS and our networking capabilities, keeping this whole connector concept alive, and expanding and growing.
So one of the things that we hit on here is multi-domain AD authentication. So if you guys are familiar with how Windows connectors work, you've got to place these cloud connectors in each of the domains where you've got users that need to access resources. And so, what we've introduced here, this is pretty slick, is the fact that you can put a single set of cloud or connector appliances in and have it cross domains, which is kind of nice. So if you're doing SPA, you don't have to keep installing connectors just to support user accounts that sit in all these different locations. So that's kind of a big win in terms of reducing the footprint. But, I love the fact that we're expanding this out to different use cases, outside of just SPA or just, eventually, hopefully DAS. But, we've got hypervisor here, SPA. Do I know what IPS is? I think I do. Todd, what is that? What are we talking about there?
Well, I highlighted the words Citrix Hypervisor Cloud.
Mm-hmm.
What does that mean?
It's a service that you can leverage to manage your on-premise XenServer pools, hypervisor pools. So, think of it almost like XenCenter in the cloud, where you can push patches and updates out from a central location to all your, your pools that are sitting in a location. It's pretty slick.
I thought that's what it meant, but then at the same time, I started envisioning this cloud built by Citrix as an alternative to some of the others, and my brain just started spinning out of control.
You turned it into something else, didn't you?
It's yeah, I did, and who knows? But I knew about the XenServer management from the cloud. Yes, makes total sense. At the same time, just a handful of data centers run by Citrix running XenServer as a cost-effective alternative option. I don't know. That's where my business brain went. Somebody's shooting.
I think what you just did is turned us into a hyperscaler, if I understood you correctly.
That certainly is what it sounds like. But I would agree with.
Yeah,
I would agree with you, Geremy, that I think the multi-domain authentication piece here is really significant. Bringing that forward into the connector appliance, because we do run into customers more often than not that have multiple domains, typically from acquisition that they haven't yet folded in. And we end up having to deploy multiple connector appliances in order to enable access to resources in those domains, whether you're talking about DAS or whether you're talking about SPA or something related. So I think that's that will be a huge benefit when they get that folded in. And then of course, if we ever get DAS folded into this, I think that will obviously be another huge selling point for it.
Well, guys, I think we've covered this topic. Todd, anything on the Citrix front or Todd's world that you'd like to bring up?
Just keeping busy. It's a great opportunity for us to get back out in front of customers and have something new to have conversations about. Certainly, I'm looking forward to the spring thaw and being able to travel. I've got my first official trip in my new role scheduled to go out to Vancouver in the next couple of weeks, and then heading up to Ottawa. So
world.
Get your chance to go up and visit some folks up there.
Sorry, Geremy, anything we didn't cover you'd like to bring up?
No. Listen, I think this is a fantastic topic. And I will say this: I had a chance to chat with Barry and Moen earlier or late last week, and so just sort of spending some additional time with XenTegra and a lot of the things that we've got going on there. I'm pretty excited about your business and just kind of the future, what you guys got going on. So that's my world right now.
Yeah, we've been investing heavily in growing our team, and man, it's really starting to come together. Bill, anything on your side?
Well, I would just say that I'm always happy to talk to Geremy. If he ever wants to reach out, we can just chat. I'm always happy to have conversations with him. So don't just talk to Moen and Barry. I'm here too. I'm also really looking forward to, as far as what Todd was saying about getting out and doing some traveling. I've been doing a lot more this year than I have in the past. And next week I'll be in Birmingham. If any of our listeners will be at our event in Birmingham, I will be there to get a chance to interact with some customers and partners, and really looking forward to that opportunity to really get out and mingle with the folks that use our services and work with us. So looking forward to that.
All right. Well, I appreciate you gentlemen jumping on here today. Hopefully my connectivity hasn't caused too much of an issue. I can't wait to go back and listen to see the difference between what I could hear and what was recorded up in the cloud. But guys, I appreciate it, and we'll do it again next week.
Okay. Thanks,
Thank
Andy.
You. Take care, guys.
All right. See you guys.